creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary.
Is your first name Travis?
Yes.
The Extraordinary is the story of Travis Walton. No UFO encounter has ever fallen into the category of the incident at Turkey Springs. There were 6 witnesses. All passed lie detector tests. All swore to what happened that day in Arizona's White Mountains.
While you were standing near this UFO-like object, do you believe you were struck by an energy force emitted from that large object?
Yes.
It is this startling wedding photograph taken late last year in a London church. A photograph that captured the image of an uninvited guest. A ghost.
Freaked me out when I first saw it. Oh, I hope he was a good one.
I showed it to people at work and the hairs on their arm literally stood on end when they looked at it.
It is the story of a woman who shocked a courtroom with claims she could undergo major surgery without anesthetic. She produced videotapes to prove it.
My hand shook a little bit when I made that first incision. She didn't bat an eyelash. She just said, just do what you gotta do. I don't feel anything.
It is the series of supernatural happenings over 3 days in the life of a veteran Australian bushman. Events that chill him to this day.
Those 3 days will live with me to the end of my life. They were the weirdest 3 days that I can ever recall in all my travels.
And the thoughts of Hollywood actor Robert Wagner about life, the human soul, and the hereafter.
I believe that there definitely is a higher being.
Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. On a given night, when the moon is right and the imagination is at work, a lone person might see things that don't really exist, like ghosts, spirits, maybe UFOs. But when 7 grown men see the same thing, and they all swear after 18 years that what they saw was real, then you have to take notice. In the case of Travis Walton, every witness took a lie detector test, and the results spelled UFO.
Is your first name Travis?
Yes.
On November the 5th, 1975, in the forest area called Turkey Springs, did you see a large glowing object hovering in the air?
Yes.
While you were standing near this UFO-like object, do you believe you were struck by an energy force emitted from that large object?
Yes.
After regaining consciousness in a small, humid room, did you see non-human creatures with large dark eyes moving about the room?
Yes.
Did you conspire with your brother Dwayne or anyone, or act alone, to stage a hoax about your UFO abduction?
No.
It happened deep in the woods of the White Mountains of northeastern Arizona at 5:49 p.m. Travis Walton was 22 years old. He was with 6 other woodcutters returning to their hometown of Snowflake as twilight settled on the rugged woods where they'd worked all day. The crew supervisor, Mike Rogers, was at the wheel as they rounded a bend and came upon a clearing and the hovering light.
It was very clear, very vivid, and it was, 75 or 100 feet from the truck. I verified that later on with my own step and loft measurements.
Travis Walton has walked that same clearing 100 times since that afternoon 18 years ago. He still hasn't found an answer.
I had pretty bad nightmares for a long time, but I just had to cope with this thing and get on with my life.
The events surrounding that day are the subject of a new movie called Fire in the Sky, which opens here soon. But the question goes unanswered. No reported UFO encounter on Earth has ever fallen into the category of the Travis Walton case. His reported abduction by unknown beings was witnessed by all 6 of his co-workers, including Mike Rogers.
This brilliant flash of light just lit up the whole woods right there. It was almost blinded me. It did blind me temporarily, just for a few seconds. I turned back around and glanced back to my right, where I'd seen Travis standing, and he's flying back through the air. You know, he was just like as if a grenade or explosion had gone off in front of him.
We all saw the thing. We all saw the guy get zapped.
All swore to the same story.
That's the truth, mister. That's exactly what happened. Is it?
All except one submitted to lie detector tests at the time and passed. Then this year, every single one of them took more sophisticated polygraph tests conducted by the same man. All, including Walton, passed.
Mr. Walton is telling the truth when he claims that this is not a hoax, that he went on board what he believed to be went on board a UFO and was later deposited on a road in Heber. His story is truthful in reference to the questions I asked.
The people of Snowflake can't explain what happened that evening, including the then sheriff, Marlon Gillespie.
My belief is that those individuals, those 6 individuals, seen something that they believed was a UFO.
Come on, get back in the truck!
When the blue light appeared above them that evening, Travis bolted from the passenger side door.
I felt kind of like an electric shock go through my body, and it kind of made me go numb, and I blacked out.
What's that thing? Oh, my God. What the hell's he doing out there? Get back to the truck. What the hell is it?
And I hit the gas, and these guys are simultaneously screaming at me to get the hell out of there, and I was gone.
They thought it had killed me, and they panicked.
As the truck sped off, Travis recalls an unworldly series of events.
I don't know how I got on board. All I know is that when I regained consciousness, that's where I was. I was in a lot of pain, just a tremendous amount of pain. I was lying on my back on a table, and there was a light above me. And, you know, I couldn't focus my eyes at first. I saw these creatures standing over me that I knew I wasn't in a hospital. And at that point, I just flipped out. I just became hysterical.
When Rogers and his crew drove back to the clearing, Travis was gone.
Whoever they were, wherever they were from, they had taken him. And I was like overcome with emotion by this. I mean, I broke down.
Travis Walton would not be heard from again for 5 days and 6 hours. Back in the town of Snowflake, the story reported by Rogers and his men was met first with derision, then grave suspicion.
We started looking at, checking them, or just watching them for, see if we could observe if they'd been drinking or appeared to be on drugs.
Search parties scoured the White Mountains. As the days passed, the unspoken accusation was clear. Mike Rogers and his men had murdered Travis Walton, hidden the body, and made up the UFO story. Not surprisingly, all the men were nervous about taking the lie detector test.
If you're lying, my machine will show it. If you're clean, it'll show that too. How do we know you ain't been bought off? Make us look bad.
Alan Dallas actually refused the test because of the accusations. But Cy Gilson's test findings would throw the sheriff's theory out the window.
Each individual did not kill Walton. Each individual was not involved in causing Walton to disappear by being hurt or burying him in the woods or whatever it may be. And each of the 5 were truthful when they said they saw what they believed to be a UFO.
And then, after those 5 days and 6 hours, Travis Walton woke up beside a road near the town of Heber.
There was a light shining down onto the road. When I looked up to see where the light was coming from, I saw this object hovering there. And just as I looked, it shot straight up out of sight, real fast, silently.
And then he told the even more bizarre story of being taken aboard the alien craft.
It was quite a small room, dimly lit, and it was very difficult to breathe in there. It seemed like the air was too warm and humid or something. It was very hard to catch my breath.
The creatures had examined him and taken fluid samples from his body. Some of the creatures were human-like.
I saw 4 of them all together, and 3 of them are the ones that rendered me unconscious. When I first saw this human-looking person, I thought I was being saved, that I was being rescued by people.
To this day, there are doubters who believe that 7 woodcutters pulled a fantastic hoax on the world at 5:49 p.m. on November the 5th, 1975, like Rich Robertson, who covered the story.
Most of the time, the people who see UFOs are people that were predisposed to believing in them to begin with. I guess UFOs have a way of picking out those particular people.
But others, like the sheriff who suspected them of murder, have changed their minds.
I believe that there's unanswered questions out there from outer space. I think that there's probably some occurrences happening that our government may be aware of that they're not telling us.
The 7 men involved don't see much of each other anymore. They hadn't talked about the incident for years, until the Hollywood movie was made. And the world began to ask the same questions all over again. Getting married is a very special time in anyone's life. Friends gather, and in the case of Melbourne draftsman Matthew Colopy and English nanny Claire Merrison, those friends were from opposite sides of the globe. But in the small church at Chiddingly, just outside London, where Matt and Claire tied the knot late last year, there was not 1, but 2 uninvited guests. No one saw them at the time, but when the wedding pictures were developed, there they were, ghostly figures caught on film. First up, here's Alison Holloway with the secrets of Chiddingly and its church.
Nestling in East Sussex, about 50 miles from London, the village of Chiddingly at first seems a picturesque but unremarkable hamlet. But its present-day serenity belies the undercurrent of feeling amongst villagers that all is not what it seems. For this small parish holds some dark secrets. The last person to be hanged in East Sussex was a woman from Chiddingly who brought about the untimely death of her husband by lacing his food with arsenic. The case was dubbed the Onion Pie Murder.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, the girls
But to
didn't
Claire
like
Merrison, Chiddingly was just an idyllic setting for the family home, which she left after school to work as a nanny in Paris before finding love on the other side of the world.
This is the man who stole Claire Merrison's heart, Australian draftsman Matthew Colopy. And according to both of them, when they met in Victoria, it was love at first sight. That was back in 1991, and soon after, they decided to marry. The date was set, December the 19th, 1992, and the location was chosen. the beautiful and mysterious church in Claire's hometown of Chiddingly.
Well, we decided to get married in England because my parents, as bride's parents, were going to be doing the wedding, and I felt that it was only right that because the decision had been made that we were going to be living here after the wedding, that they should have the pleasure of putting the wedding on for us there. Matt's parents, unfortunately, couldn't be there, but it turned out to be quite a large wedding, about 120 people.
So, the wedding had to be recorded. That way, Matt and Claire would be able to share the happy event with his family back home in Australia. There was an official video cameraman and an official stills photographer. The video was everything they expected. The stills were everything and more. When the couple studied two of the photographs closely, they discovered that an uninvited guest had quietly witnessed the ceremony.
The two photographs are different. The first one is where we're actually facing the vicar, and then the second one is when we turn to say our vows to each other. So in two separate shots, which could be, I don't know, it could be a minute, it could be 5 minutes between. It's still there.
But who or what was watching over the congregation that day? The vicar who performed the ceremony has his own thoughts on the ghosts of Chiddingly Church. We'll come to that in a moment, but first there's something you should know. The strange images don't just show up on the prints you're looking at now.
I'd have to say we've captured something. I couldn't see it being a fault in the camera. If it's on two separate negatives, it's there on the negatives.
Of course, it could just be imagination, or a matter of interpretation. After all, the image does look suspiciously like a puff of smoke.
If it was smoke, then the second photograph, because looking at that, we've changed angles. And looking at that photo, if it was smoke, there was a drafty old church, so there's no way that the smoke could have stayed as it was.
You can see the whole silhouette in the face, and I don't know whether it's a ruffle
like
around the neck. It looks like a ruffle.
Shirt with the ruffles on them, or it's a beard.
Freaked me out when I first saw it. I hope it was a good one.
I showed it to people at work, and the hairs on their arm literally stood on end when they looked at it.
A spirit watching over the nuptials? It's certainly intriguing. And even more intriguing, the apparition isn't there at all on the wedding video. The still camera certainly captured something mysterious that day. But there's more to those two photographs than the smoky spirit in the corner. Take an even closer look and you'll see a second uninvited guest. A second spirit, a little girl dressed in green. The big question is, exactly who were those two ghostly guests? Back to Alison Holloway, who's been investigating them, and their mysterious appearance.
Warwick, this is where the vicar stood to conduct the wedding ceremony. And had the uninvited guest been visible to the naked eye, you would have thought he was in the best possible position to see the ghost that day. After all, he would only have had to have glanced to his left to see the spirits looking on. Patrick Amos has been the rector of Chiddingly for the last 10 years and was presiding over the service that day.
The little girl who was standing approximately where I'm standing now, she appears to be wrapped in a shawl and she's watching me conduct the service, while at the same time there's a fella hovering just here, kneeling down with a book in his hand, seemingly following the words. That's all how we can explain it. There's no other way to explain it.
The vicar has a somewhat bizarre explanation of the shadowy figures in the photographs. None of the Australian groom's relatives were in church for the wedding, or were they?
I just wonder whether it was some of their ancestors and they'd forgotten to invite them, and so they just came along uninvited.
Claire's parents, Penny and Paul Merrison, were overflowing with pride on the day and saw nothing amiss as their daughter embarked on her married life.
It was a lovely, happy day. I don't know. I had not thought about ghosts much before.
But there is a figure there in the photograph.
There appears to be a figure there in the photograph, yes, there does.
The man responsible for capturing the apparitions on film is Tom Reeves, whose family's photographic business is the oldest in the country. He is as baffled as anyone by the supernatural additions to his prints.
Right, now these are the two negatives we're talking about. They're consecutive frames from a standard wedding film. The numbers tell you it's frames 15 and 16. You can tell from the side of the film. Taken on a very standard camera, the reliable old Rolleiflex. It won't allow you to do double exposures, and it's so simple. I like it because nothing ever goes wrong, but you can't play about with it, and so they are straightforward exposures. And the fact that they are two consecutive frames in which the figures in the standard figures in the photograph have moved, but these spectral images are exactly the same, would indicate that they couldn't have been tampered with because it's exactly duplicating itself.
In all your years as a photographer, Tom, have you ever seen anything like this before?
I never have. I mean, I've been photographing weddings for 10 years now. I've been to Chiddingly before. And it's quite extraordinary.
If indeed these photographs do provide evidence of some spiritual activity, it will come as no surprise to the vicar.
I do believe in ghosts. I've experienced them before, I've seen them. But they can't hurt you. And so what happened at the wedding was quite possible, but unexplainable.
The unexplained that has played a part in actor Robert Wagner's life.
I'm a positive person. I'm not a person who is a cynic or someone who takes on a saying, well, that can't happen, that can't work. You know, I'm always kind of saying, well, maybe it does.
The woman who could turn off pain with her willpower. In court, she produced videotapes to prove it.
I just knew in the very core of my soul that I could have an operation and not feel pain and not have anesthetic.
And the series of supernatural happenings in the life of bushman Larry Dalhunty, events that remain unexplained to this day.
Most of us try to take the middle ground on questions of the unexplained or unknown. We don't want to be too cynical or too gullible about things we don't understand. That's a fairly average stance, and pretty much the way we found longtime movie actor Robert Wagner when we visited his Hollywood ranch.
His friends call him RJ, and Wagner's not only an average guy, he's one of the most respected people in show business. He's built a career that has spanned the old and the new eras of Hollywood. He's also experienced great personal tragedy. He lost the woman he married twice, Natalie Wood, in a drowning accident off the California coast 11 years ago. After helping his children Natasha, Courtney and Katie survive the loss, he's refound his own happiness with actress Jill St. John. Professionally and personally, Wagner has endured. So we were interested in his thoughts about life and beyond.
There must be something there. You know, something must be pulling us around. I believe that there definitely is a higher being. I've been involved in astrology, and I've been involved in sort of for anything that works, you know, that can kind of make you positive, and I think that's one of the things that I've been very fortunate about, that I'm a positive person. I'm not a person who is a cynic or someone who takes on a saying, well, that can't happen, that can't work. You know, I'm always kind of saying, well, maybe it does. You know, maybe that does. Am I superstitious? Yeah, I think I'm a little superstitious. Yeah, I am. I'm sort of for anything that makes it work. You know, if somebody says, if you put a hat on the bed, it's bad luck, I don't put the hat on the bed. I believe that God is within oneself, you know, within the person, and I feel that if you can give to somebody else and give to other people in a very honest way and try to sort of get through it all with some kind of dignity and some kind of honesty. I think that's about the best you can do. I know that my connection with my children, I look at them, and I can know sometimes what they're feeling. I know that they know what I'm feeling at times. I know it with Jill. You know, I can feel it. And I think that that's a very fortunate thing for any individual, to be open enough to be able to look into somebody, to see that, be able to see those things. It's lucky, you know.
Are you a believer in fate?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am.
How does that play itself out for you?
Well, I don't know. I think that actors believe in fate a lot. I think fate is a good thing to believe in. You never know what's going to happen. And I think that most actors, and I think it's very good for people who aren't actresses, to try to live within the moment. And if you can live within the moment, then I think you are a believer in fate, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the next beat is going to be. I'm not a very predictable, you know, I'm sort of interested in what's going to happen.
Perhaps it was fate that led Natalie Wood into his life's path.
She was just a kid at Fox, you know, and she was walking down the hallway with her mother, and she saw me, and she said to her mother, she said, "I'd like to marry him one day." Well, it's fate, maybe, huh?
Do you believe in reincarnation?
To some degree, yeah. I think that's a possibility. I wouldn't mark that out.
Do you believe a soul goes on?
I do, yes. I do believe a soul goes on. I do believe that there's more out there than what's just here. And I sincerely hope that a soul goes on, because there are a lot of beautiful souls that are out there.
Penny Polito couldn't decide whether she was gifted or cursed. She knew she had abilities nobody else had, amazing abilities. But more often than not, they brought her misery and rejection. She saw events before they happened, but those events were almost always tragic. She became a sort of psychic of doom. And one day recently, she was called upon to prove her abilities in court.
She seemed such a small woman to be carrying such a burden. Penny Polito at 53 is only 1.5 meters tall and weighs just 36 kilos. Yet it was on these shoulders that the entire world of psychic phenomena seemed to rest. For the first time in the American system of jurisprudence, a court would have to decide her case by determining if there is such a thing as psychic power. A 6-member jury of 3 men and 3 women would examine the abilities of Mrs. Polito and deliver a verdict that would either put an official legal stamp on the paranormal or discredit it. We'll get to that verdict in a moment, but first, a condensed history of the remarkable life of Penny Polito. She says she was 7 or 8 when she had a premonition of her grandmother's death. When the grandmother did die, Penny's mother punished her by making her kneel on raw rice and cracked corn. At the age of 10, she got into more trouble when she told a playmate she had a vision of the girl's grandfather lying in a box. The grandfather died a month later, and the playmate's mother banned Penny from the house. She said she was satanic and evil.
You can't come in here. Don't come back anymore.
Years later in Tampa, Florida, Penny begged a co-worker to make her daughter change travel plans.
But I really feel it's important. I have this feeling. Don't ignore it.
The fatal head-on collision Penny foresaw came true. The dead girl's father came to Penny's house and told her,
I just wanted to take a look at the woman who killed my little girl.
Penny's premonitions have never been the kind to make her popular with the neighbours. The one that terrified her and husband James the most happened in 1981. She was with him on a hunting trip near Palm Beach. They ran into a young couple, and Penny froze.
As soon as I saw them, I don't know how else to say this, I felt the touch of death on me. I knew the couple would be harmed. I said, within 48 hours, that couple is going to be dead, both of them.
The couple was found murdered in the woods a week later. Polito not only described their bullet wounds, she pinpointed the spot where police would find their bodies.
I tossed it over in my mind a million times, should I have said something to the couple. But if somebody comes up to you, a complete stranger in the middle of the woods, and says, you know, I think you ought to get the hell out of here, because if you don't, you and your husband are going to be dead. Look, what kind of nut is this?
In November 1984, she first realized she had another amazing power. She could suddenly turn off all pain. Mrs. Polito calls it the process of going automatic, or piping in.
I call what I have, rather than say I'm psychic, I say I have my pipeline.
By the time Mrs. Polito would have her day in court, she'd undergone major surgery on her foot and serious breast surgery, without the help of anesthetic. It was all recorded on video.
It was probably the most extraordinary thing I'd ever seen.
The court case in Broward County Circuit Court came about later when Penny sued a hardware store called the Home Depot. While Penny and James, her husband of 33 years, were in the store in April 1987, a stack of heavy lumber fell on her head.
It knocked me to my knees, and I instantly got 2 goose-egg-sized lumps on my head.
The injury, she claimed, had left her bruised and dazed. But worse, she had lost her ability to turn off all pain.
Scientists have never seen automatic working like my physicians have seen it working during surgery. I haven't got it anymore to show them.
When the trial got underway, on January the 28th, 1991, the hardware store's lawyer, James Locke, found himself up against a lineup of medical testimony that could not be ignored. First, there was the story told by a well-respected and amazed podiatrist, Dr. Sheldon Willans.
I had never heard of anyone cutting a bone out of the foot without anesthetic. She insisted that it could be done.
My hand shook a little bit when I made that first incision. And when you make an incision with a scalpel into the foot, there's a significant amount of blood. And she didn't bat an eyelash. She just said, just do what you got to do. I don't feel anything.
To discredit Penny, the hardware store brought in James Randi, the author who debunked spoonbender Uri Geller. But the evidence Penny Polito delivered next, the videotape and testimony by Dr. Alan Fields, brought the courtroom to hushed silence.
And I know I've seen a phenomena. I know I've seen something to me which is absolutely amazing. This is surgerizing someone with a scalpel, and she never did anything more than smile.
I felt the needle go through, but minus the pain, no pain.
And the undeniable drama of Mrs. Polito's videotape became the hottest talk in Florida medical circles.
I don't know how she did that. I don't know what she did, but I've never seen it like that before.
For 2 weeks, little Penny Polito battled in the witness stand, and the jury faced evidence that seemed taken from a science fiction movie. At one point, even the judge was moved to comment, "I don't understand it, but I believe in faith healing." Defense lawyers Locke, while disputing Mrs. Polito's special powers, nevertheless asked Judge Marco to order her not to invade the minds of jurors and witnesses. The judge refused.
You know, Judge, all I'm asking is an opportunity to defend this case on equal grounds as the plaintiff.
When it was over, the jury was left with 2 questions. Did Penny Polito have psychic ability? And did the hardware store cause her to lose it? The bad news for Penny was a meagre award of $1,000 for the Home Depot's negligence. But the more important principle about her psychic ability was summed up in the final judgment. The plaintiff, Penny Polito, had automatic ability, which she did not lose. And for little Penny Polito, after a lifetime of doubters, ridicule and rejection, that vindication was worth more than all the money in the world.
People from the bush are generally down to earth. They take life as it comes. They don't tend to be fazed by quirks of nature. Larry Dulhunty's one of those typical bushies. But there are 3 days in Larry's life he'll never forget and never be able to explain.
It's hot out here, and bright. Not a lot can pass without explanation. Everything can be seen and heard. It's the outback, in the heart of Australia. A place not a lot of people ever really see, ever really understand. But one thing a bushie will tell you, away from the noise and the lights of the city, you'll hear and see things out here that can take your breath away.
This part of Australia, between Cloncurry and the Gulf country, is about as remote as you can get. The people up here are straight shooters. They tell it as it is. Larry Dulhunty's one of those straight shooters. For more than 40 years, he's roamed the outback with his travelling boxing troupe and variety show. He's learned to live by his wits and live off the land, and he's had many a baffling experience.
But the weirdest 3 days was sometime in the 1970s when I left Charter Stowers to perform at the Normanton races in company with my daughter Judy and a boxer.
Rewards are few in the bush. After a long, hot day's travelling, the group set up camp and relaxed under a seemingly peaceful night sky.
Quiet air, it's a good quiet camp, that's good how it should be.
But this night was to be anything but peaceful.
When suddenly my daughter Judy screamed in terror, and here was this object hovering about twice treetop level for just an instant, and it took off at high speed, lighting up the whole countryside.
It takes a lot to unnerve a bushie. So despite the shock of the unknown, the Dulhunty troupe decided the show had to go on.
24 hours later, a new campsite, hundreds of kilometres down the track. But what was to follow would make the events of the previous night seem almost normal.
Well, it was between midnight and dawn. I woke up. I don't know what woke me. It was a freezing cold night, and my head was under the blankets. And the blankets were gradually moving up and down, up and down. I thought, my God, there's somebody here's going to club me over the head with a weapon. And after these blankets had moved up and down several times, I suddenly threw the blankets off and jumped out, ready to defend myself. And there was not a sign, not a sound. The bush was completely still, eerie stillness. No wind that could have been blowing the blankets. I just could never be able to explain what that was.
The next morning, Larry decided he was better off keeping that experience to himself. That was until he joined the others and found out that he wasn't the only one who had trouble during the night.
But as we were drinking tea at the campfire, Captain McLean said, he said, "By gee, Larry, I had a weird experience last night. It just felt as though somebody was lifting my blankets up and down." Well, you know, it's a funny thing that you should say that, because last night during the night, my blankets kept moving up and down like that, and I was petrified.
Larry and young McLean left it there, and the trio set off again, through the lonely Queensland bush. They were headed for another town, another show, and their third encounter with the unknown. This one, the most mysterious of all.
What's that, Dad?
Falling from the sky, there was thousands of cobwebs. And now don't ask me to estimate the cobwebs in thousands. I couldn't. I'd have to go into millions. That's how many.
For quite a while, Larry thought maybe it was the heat, that he was seeing things. But later, he was to hear that at Burnett Downs, some 450 miles away, more cobwebs were seen drifting down to Earth. And at Charters Towers to the south, Robert Sweeney, a local alderman, was to confirm that it happened there too.
Well, in the early 70s, I was out at the golf club playing golf, and we were out on about the 4th or 5th green, and all of a sudden this sort of wind blew up and this sort of queer stuff came over. We thought it was mist for a start, light rain or something, but it turned out that it seemed to be some sort of a cotton thing or cobwebby turnout. I believe that it was hanging on telephone lines and, you know, all around the town. So I don't think it was just at the golf club. I think it was nearly all over Charters Towers.
So, how did the cobwebs get there? One report said they'd been blown in from South America by strong global winds. But John Thompson, a world expert on spiders, is not so sure.
Well, there's certainly nothing unusual about spiders floating through the air on what we call gossamer, which are just little threads of silk. But in such tremendous numbers, to me, is really mind-boggling, and I have no explanation.
These days, Larry's still on the road, way out west, still mystified by those events back in the 70s. His daughter, Judy, has settled down in North Queensland, but her mind is far from settled. The memories trouble her to this day, and even now she has nightmares, vivid dreams of blinding lights and cobwebs.
It terrified me to see something like this. I mean, it's just unexplainable to see something like this at quite a young age.
Those 3 days will live with me to the end of my life. They were the weirdest 3 days that I can ever recall in all my travels.
Shot in a million. A bullet that ricocheted off New York Harbor, traveled 2 kilometers, and beat impossible odds to claim a life in highway traffic. An untold story. Next week.
That story about the magic bullet is one of the most amazing I've seen in a long while. Don't miss it. Thanks for joining us tonight. But before we go, another story from our show next week. It's about a woman named Sandra Hill and her frightening discovery that she had lived a previous life. Sandra's story is riveting. Under hypnosis, she becomes a woman who lived more than 100 years ago. But Sandra's nightmare is the stark tragedy of her own previous death.
My whole being changed. I went from me, being me, to this young, vibrant young lady who was just glad to be alive and glad to run to this gentleman in the doorway. My foot caught in the hoop. With that, I rolled and fell.